Call to order. The first order of business is for the committee to approve the minutes for November 25th Justice and Public Safety meeting.
Motion to approve the minutes for November 25th.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Motion. Aye. Second line, committee to review the EMS ordinance. What we got?
All right, we'll jump into that. So, council or committee, what I've sent you, you have a draft of an ordinance. The one caveat that I'll offer just for our from our county attorney, this isn't the final form of the ordinance. There's still some legal findings that would need to be included in here. So this is a draft. Michael will have to put it in our format. So this isn't exactly what would be sent to council, but the content is what would be sent to council, should the committee choose to. So I also want to recognize Chuck Haynes and Malcolm Airmore, who's with Emergency Management. They've also assisted a good deal on this. So to kind of put the ordinance, we've discussed some of this previously, but to put it the purpose and framework out there, you know, we have a significant amount of growth in York County, and our EMS system is quite unique. And what's become evident to us over the past several years, but even just over the last year with some of the changes, is that we really don't have a good governing structure behind EMS, at least from the county side, outside of our contracts. And our contracts have historically varied based off of rescue squads or hospital-based system. So what we're proposing is this is kind of a shift outside of our typical contract framework that we've normally done into a franchise system. Keep in mind, and you heard this referenced during the Atrium discussion last year, the county is a franchise, and these are franchisees. Our EMS providers are franchisees that provide the service on our behalf. So what we're proposing through this ordinance is a franchise framework, but it establishes consistent authority, oversight, and particularly accountability across the entire county. Similar to other discussions we've had in public safety, we want to deliver the same services no matter where you are located in the county, no matter what ambulance provider is responding to you. And yet there's a variation of that across the county. Really important though, the intention of this is not to disrupt the current level of service that's provided, but it really ensures that the emergency medical transport side, it's coordinated, reliable, and that it's alignment. There's alignment across the county with all of our providers. So this is what the purpose of that ordinance is, and that draft is in front of you.
Okay.
So, cool question on this one. So, you know, based on distance, right? You know, I know that we want to offer everybody the same what we're getting across the board. So, when it comes to the fire department, how are they going to play? How do you view that they'll play a role in delivering that package overall? Because I mean, distance-wise, unless we have ambulances sitting, you know, placed everywhere, I'm just kind of trying to, in my mind, I'm kind of structuring how can we accomplish what we get on, you know, on one side of the county as opposed to where it's more remote.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that we are addressing through our fire service strategic plan.
Okay.
Kind of increasing the medical services on that side of the house as well.
Mm-hmm.
What you've got in front of you with this ordinance is strictly as it relates to the EMS providers that are transport agencies. So they're absolutely, to your point, Tom, they're 100% intertwined, and it's a melding of the two as they respond in first response. But this ordinance strictly dictates for the transport providers. So that's kind of the why.
Okay.
So what does this ordinance do? Really, at a high level, at the highest level of this, the ordinance has established a requirement that any ambulance service providing emergency transport in the county hold a franchise. And it's a franchise issued agreement with the county. Now, there's probably some questions about, does this supersede their contracts? No, it does not. Their contracts stay in place, but there will be language included with this as we accept those franchises that as long as they're in compliance with this franchise agreement, that puts them also in compliance with their county agreement to provide medical transport. So again, it provides to, applies to anyone offering emergency services transport or in mixed use. So anyone that is emergency and non-emergency. As we see more hospital providers, usually they have a non-emergency branch as well. We wanted to make sure that our emergency system did not suffer at the hands of a non-emergent system. If you think about utilization rates, and I'll go into that in a second, from a business perspective, looking at an ambulance, the utilization rate is a very important number for them because they want to make sure that it is actually being used, is functioning. One of the ways that in some areas that they ensure that number is driven up is by that downtime when they're not on an emergent call, they're running a non-emergent call. Well, for our system, what that means is that could come at the detriment of the 911 system. You're pulling an emergency ambulance out of the system to run a non-emergency. So we made sure that we put guardrails in that to protect the 911 system.
And in your research, what percentage of the calls are determined to be non-emergent?
So I don't know that we tracked that. I don't know if Malcolm.
It has not been tracked.
So dispatch, it's about 75%, but that won't be the case once we upgrade to the new QA software. Once that's done, you'll see that number go way down.
So 75% non-emergent now?
No, it's dispatched as an emergency call.
But we don't know which ones turn into a non-emergent once you get there.
So when you talk non-emergency, you typically are talking a scheduled transport of a patient from either one ED to a floor on a different hospital, from the ED to home, from the ED to a nursing facility, sometimes even from a floor to a nursing facility. So we need to be careful and delineate between a 911 call that starts out as a priority 1 call and then becomes a non-emergent response call versus a non-emergency transport, which is the transportation of a stable patient to a fairly stable patient to another facility. There is some definition clearing that needs to be done because you can have inter-facility transports where it's, I show up maybe to Gold Hill and I'm having chest pain, and they determine that I'm having a heart attack, and so now I have to go to a facility where in which they can intervene with that PCI facility. So now they're going to have to do an emergent transport of me from there to there, which that can qualify as a 911 call and not a non-emergent transport call. So there's delineation that needs to be made, and that the ordinance helps clarify a lot of that delineation between the two.
So I know we talked about, the concept of teledoc, right? And I think that's great. So how does that, if a 911 call comes in, how does the knowledge of the receiving 911, do they transfer how did they determine if this may be more of a teledoc conversation as opposed to a emergency dispatch with full bore support? I'm just
So
trying.
that would be where EMD comes into play.
Okay.
EMD is decades upon decades of research, medical, it's clinical and operational, on how to dispatch ambulances, and it is into the program and down to a very finite science as to what you can expect based off of what the caller is given and what the call taker is receiving, and they're following that exact schedule as to what they're to ask, what the answers are come back as. And to be quite honest, I'm sure AI has started to play into that and is probably going to take it even further into how finite it's able to get to what is actually occurring on that scene.
Okay.
So EMD is going to play the major role in that. Now, as far as canceling an ambulance and sending, saying, hey, we're going to send you to a teledoc, we need to really see how EMD integrates into our system before we start really making that determination. That is down the line, and that is something that can be accomplished.
Okay.
Currently, we do not do that.
Yes.
Teledoc's a vendor, so we're saying they're virtual visits. We're not.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
Hopefully the translation
Just
came
to clarify, I
across.
don't want
Yeah,
to get out.
you're right, exactly.
But that is, that telehealth piece is.
The telehealth, right.
Is way out in the future.
Yeah.
But there's frameworks in here that will get us to that point. That
Yeah.
is a much more, future conversation.
Right, and it's also based on historical data, based on that address, correct, in that
Well,
patient?
I wouldn't say that address and that patient.
Okay.
When you want to talk about historical data, you're talking about our posting plan and how it'll morph over the day and the minute will change as to where ambulances need to be based on the highest call volume. It's really hard to put info with addresses especially patient information with addresses, because there could be 4 or 5 people living there.
Mhm.
There could also be that they move, and you can't keep up with that. But with the health systems, the EMS will be able to get that information when they get on scene to help with it.
Okay.
And if it's someone who has something that is chronic, that is very well versed in what their chronic condition is, they're going to be able to talk the dispatcher through it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Will this help, since we already have one provider contract, and we got another entity now also? And maybe in the future, there may be some private, but will this address any of those issues where it's not, one's not affecting the other, and
Coming to that in just a second.
somebody could expand more?
The short answer is yes, but coming to that in just a second. So again, just to lay out what this ordinance does, the franchise agreement sets out uniform standards, policies, practices, and expectations on behalf of the county for our EMS providers, creating consistency across the board. And then we dictate what that is instead of relying on them just to create the offer. So we have to have a minimum set of standards, and that's what this does. It gives us the ability to require that through our franchise agreement. Particularly what Tommy said, so I'm going to talk about that in a second. So the protections, the policy elements of this are really to protect our 911 emergency resources. I just talked about that a minute ago. But ambulances that are designated as part of the 911 system are thereby reserved to that, particularly what Malcolm was talking about. We used to call it convalescent. Now it's more so the inter-facility transports, keeping those independent of the 911 system. To Tommy's point, though, it also gives us the ability to expand the system. So, and now that we have multiple providers in the county, as either we see the need, there's an area of the county that's underserved or has an extended response time, we can solicit almost like you would put out an RFP. You would put out an RFP when you're wanting to solicit an engineering firm. This would be similar. We would put out to bid, essentially, an area of the county that we're looking at. And then we would have those providers, everyone would be given a fair shot to bid on that area. And there'll be criteria that we measure them on to determine what the best appropriate agency is to serve that area. It gives us more ability to enforce the oversight and create a system that doesn't just grow organically. If you look at the map and you look at your population centers, naturally you continue to see ambulances and hospital systems focus around your population centers. But at the same time, that can disparage and neglect a rural part of the county. This gives us the ability to, number one, control that, and number two, correct it. So that in the future, we've largely, in the history of EMS, have only responded to that. We receive when an ambulance is going to be put on staff or where it's going to be moved to, and then we just put it into the system. This gives us the ability to dictate and guide where those should be in the future and not just respond to it. So that's a major component of that, to make sure that we're equitably served across the entire county. The response times that are in some of the contracts are very liberal response times. They're too flexible. We really need to look at breaking the county down into something that's more achievable, because what we've put out there, they're always going to meet that. It'd be difficult not to meet some of those response times, but that's not what best serves those citizens in that area. So we want to establish, even if we look at it on an eastern versus western side, we want to correct those response times and drive it down, again, to where there's equity across the county. Any questions on that?
Look forward to hearing what you're about to go over.
Okay.
Questions at the end, maybe?
So again, the ordinance is not about regulation. It's about oversight and compliance and continuous improvement. We're not trying to regulate the system, but we are trying to improve it. Throughout here, you'll read that there's assurances granted to those that are providers in that. There's a conditional franchise in which all current providers will fall under, but within that 6-month time frame, I believe is what it is, they'll have to apply for a permanent franchise agreement. So again, this establishes that process. It also requires, as part of the franchise agreement, for all hospital providers, or all transport providers, I shouldn't just say hospital, for all transport providers to participate in 2 groups that this establishes. Number one is an oversight committee, which would be the committee that actually governs the operational aspect of it, where ambulances are deployed to, what those response time standards are. They would make recommendations to county council. We use the word formulary in EMS, what that formulary looks like, what we should be staffing and carrying on all of our ambulances, what the minimum requirements are. The second piece, which is very new to York County, but all have agreed and said that this is needed, is a quality review component. Malcolm or Chuck, do you want to, I was going to punt to them because we've talked about this a lot. You want to talk about the quality review committee piece of it? Good.
So you can look at it as like a medical control board or something along those lines, but it's very clinically based. We're looking at 911 call to cath times for MIs, look at cardiac arrest survival rates, trauma scene times. You're really digging into the actual clinical side of what is going on when our ambulances are showing up on the scenes of our citizens, residents. And it also helps drive a lot of the medical innovation in pre-hospital medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not just sticking with what pre-hospital medicine has always been, going back to the Johnny and Roy days. But you're actually looking towards how can we bring better services to our citizens to their doorstep instead of them having to go to the hospital to receive a lot of stuff. And you bring in a lot of the good medical minds. You have a medical director that leads it. You have more physicians on the group, and they're really driving a lot of this. And you can see research come out of that where York County gets on the map for doing clinical research trials. But it allows us to really dig into what is the medical care that our citizens are receiving when they dial 911 and an ambulance shows up.
So is this this medical group though, is this a group between Atrium, you're talking about Piedmont, and are they jointly doing this together?
So the county would be the one facilitating it.
Yeah.
But you would be bringing those groups together, and if MUSC comes into this county, if Novant does, you would bring them into it. You want the hospitals involved and invested in it.
I agree.
Because
Okay,
they're
that's good.
a large
Yeah.
portion of it.
So the data sourcing based on what we're getting back from the hospitals would be basically going into one repository, and we based on that, we can identify the variables on that.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay.
So go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, this group would also look at the outliers,
Mhm.
the few and far between, the oops, all that other stuff that kind
Mhm.
of happens out in the field. They would be able to go back and pick apart from the original 911 call
Mhm.
to discharge or whatever
Mhm.
the result was. This medical group led by doctors and one hopefully being employed by York County to advocate on our behalf,
Okay.
they can look at every clinical intervention and catch things that maybe staff can't. And currently, that a lot of time isn't being spent on, and so it's really an opportunity to do a lot of after-action reviews and kind of walking back on whether we need to change protocol, update training, refresh training on something if we see trends that aren't leading to great outcomes for citizens.
Yeah, that's good.
And to piggyback on what you had said earlier with the telehealth or virtual health,
Yeah.
this would be that first step moving towards that, because now it's more than just we're responding and we've got a response time less than 10 minutes. We've got on-scene time less. Now it's actually, okay, what did the patient call complaining of? What were they discharged as? And the physicians that saw that patient once they got to the hospital across the medical continuum. So now we're able to look and go, okay, well, if our dispatch they're being dispatched as an abdominal pain,
Right.
and they're getting to the hospital and they're being shown that they've got a heart attack or a STEMI, and then they're being discharged for something else, then we can find and make those connections, and we can start really moving towards that. All right, based off dispatch protocol, we're going to refer you to a virtual physician. If that virtual physician feels that you still need an ambulance, they'll call us back and help them with it.
Right, exactly.
So one thing that we do a great job of tracking now is response time data.
Yeah.
We have a lot of that. We can show, kind of the general responses around the county, what's longer, what's shorter response times. We've got ample data behind that. What we have zero data of is this quality review. We've never had this process or this kind of function in the county. So this is very new. Now, individually, each hospital provider or transport provider does that internally.
Mhm.
But what we don't have is a sharing and kind of a collaborative
Yeah,
effort towards that.
exactly.
So since we're all operating in York County, this
Mhm.
allows us all to share with each other, and then by having a quality review, quality assurance is another thing that is called internally, then we can help guide, and that, frankly, it should be guiding all the way from Chuck's point to the 911 call,
Mhm.
because that's the very first lifeline that is in there. So it'll give us data and feedback from the very minute that you call 911, and we can improve with the system as well,
Mhm.
not just the transport providers.
Yeah, and, sorry. One last question, apologize, but, so when they are picked up and they have a favorite hospital, right? So they have a primary hospital, Atrium or Piedmont primary. So that changes the distance maybe where they need to go to. So when that results come back, are we pooling it to identify what would have been the better? I guess,
That would be a major.
this
part of
is a patient choice of where they want to go. So that's where,
So that would be a major part of this, and
Right.
is now you're looking at, trauma is the big one,
right,
because you have Piedmont Medical Center, who is a level 3 trauma center.
right.
Going up the road to Atrium, Maine, level 1 trauma center.
Mhm.
Novant, Maine is level 2 trauma center, I believe now. And then Caramont and Gastonia, I believe, is a trauma center. So if we look at that in the quality review, and that just as a very specific
Mhm.
example, if we were to look at that in the quality review committee, let's say that I am out riding a dirt bike because, I think that I'm a lot younger than I am. I wreck the dirt bike, they come and pick me up, I reach the criteria for them to take me to the closest trauma facility. It happens to be Piedmont,
Mhm.
but I'm an Atrium patient. We can review that in that quality review committee. Did they meet the trauma criteria to go to Piedmont, or should they have bypassed Piedmont
Fair
and
enough.
taken
Fair enough.
to a trauma 1 facility?
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
So to that point, you actually led to my next slide. So what are the franchise terms, the enforcement, what is the county authority in this? So the franchises are issued for an initial 3-year term, and the renewals are for 3-year terms. That gives us plenty of time, there's plenty of data to collect in those 3 years, and we can change and actually modify the system and progressively get better as they all participate in this. We, the county, retain the authority to modify the franchise, any of those requirements. That includes adjusting the number of units, but it also gives us an enforcement capability that we've lacked previously. There's penalties or fines that are associated with this if we do have a franchise provider that is not meeting their contractual obligation. We can finally, for the first time, we would be able to enforce penalties on that as well. So that's a new component of this. Obviously, that's a very contentious one, but again, we're putting these in place to make sure that the county has some type of recourse at our disposal to enforce compliance with the franchise agreement. And then finally, probation, there's different things in there, but Tom's point, it's already in there today, but this furthermore enhances and defines the patient choice criteria, making sure that they can at all times, as a condition of the franchise, choose their hospital of choice, that they're transported there within those certain criteria. And again, that quality review is a very important piece. That is, we do encounter the ones that they have to be transported to the closest appropriate facility. Did they meet that criteria? So we'll be able to review that. Again, at this point, it's largely just a handshake. We review that and talk about the data, but there's not necessarily an enforcement criteria behind it. Now we would be empowered to do that.
So overall, it gives us more standing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, kind of the transition, this is our next steps and timeline as we move into this. So our existing providers, Atrium, Piedmont, and River Hills, but we know that that's changing. The existing providers will receive a conditional franchise during this transition, so that will be good for 6 months. That's automatic. In that 6 months, we will begin developing our policies and procedures, and we will have by the end of that 6 months, the application period that they would apply for a 3-year franchise agreement with the county. So that's the next step. We'll have the timelines in place for when we will have this quality review committee stood up, operational committee, and both of those will be important components as we launch into their first 3-year agreement. We'll have those set up and established. So that's kind of the timeline right in front of us. As far as the APS committee, what we presented to you is this framework. You have largely the content of the ordinance in front of you. Again, Michael Kendry will put this in the county's format for the ordinance. But any feedback that you have or recommendation, and then after that, it's really ready for you to consider advancing it to full council, and that would just be Michael, again, codifying it into our format and council going through their approval process.
So basically, you'd like to have us review it and bring it back to next meeting.
If you're ready the next meeting, and whenever you're ready for us to consider advancing it to council, we've kind of finished our work on it so far. So any changes or modifications you wish to make or any questions that you have, happy to answer those, but we're ready to present it for your advancement to council.
So under the 3-year agreement, what are the KPI measurements? Like, I know we have them, right? So those are variables being there at a certain time, but like all of those would be measured on what, a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis?
Yeah, so as it stands now with our agreements, we have a monthly review process with each provider.
Okay.
That would be, again, included in there.
Mhm.
They'll do a great job of
Mhm.
meeting those requirements.
Okay.
We will have more data requirements in here. Again, when I reference the utilization hours, we don't require that currently. We require it at Piedmont because there's of Atrium. That's a newer agreement.
Okay.
They provide that, but we've never really explored that with Piedmont. They have the data.
Yeah.
It's not something that we review with them because it falls outside their current agreement.
Right.
So all the data will be consistent across the board, and yes, a monthly review, and then it'll be part of the quality review committee to review that and make adjustments as we need to. But that gives us the ability to guide that process.
Absolutely. Okay, good deal. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Anything else?
No, sir. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Now, let's see, we'll move on to staff provide a brief update on the fires.
So,
You have to close this to when it goes.
so thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to tell you some really good things that are going on with County Fire. But I want to start with this for the fire metrics dashboard. I want to make sure that y'all are familiar with that. We've done some updates to it, and then I'm going to talk about some of our performance metrics that we're looking into. So real briefly, I'm just going to go over this. I'm going to start at the top left. You can filter the calls by priority 1 and priority 2. You can do months at a time, and you can do years at a time. Then we have career fire departments on the top right, and then you may have volunteer combinations on the bottom, broken down by urban, suburban, and rural. The one thing that we kind of focus on is the turnout time and the response time, because that's most important. We have an emergency, those are critical, and we need to get the trucks out. So let me go back just a minute. This is not punitive. What we're trying to evaluate is where we can improve. And even once we get to that mark, we want to look at continuous improvement. So we've asked, GIS has been great, they worked with us, they've updated a couple of things. The other night at the Fire Advisory Committee, they asked a couple of more updates that we will be working with GIS on, but this is a great tool. Can you switch to just the total calls up there? So there's several metrics in there that you can look at. And this is forward facing, so if the public wants to look at it, they can look at it as well. This shows your calls. You can even get down into the department metrics. There's a lot of good data that we get. Now, I'm going to go back because Malcolm said something just a minute. This is raw data that we get out of the CAD. Once we get our RMS data up, we can compare what we're dispatched to what we arrive to what actions we take. So in the future, we'll be able to, I think we can do it now, but we can say at patient side, we can say fire under control. We can do a lot of different metrics to capture how the fire departments are performing. Any questions on that?
That's pretty interesting. We don't have that in our packet. Is that something you could Could you email it to us?
Send you the link.
Yeah, we can send you the link. It's on the website. It's forward facing, so the public can look at it. And it's updated at the first of every month, within 5 days of the first of every month.
So does this identify, you know, so we're looking at turnout and travel time. Do we look at impact of event? Like, so there was a 3-alarm fire that impacted a major
Not
size of event?
Yeah, not at this time, but
Okay.
in the future, we hope to pull that out of our records management system.
Okay.
This is mainly focusing on turnout time, response times, arrival times, and we even want to look at, which has come from the 911 side, we want to look at the call processing time.
Okay.
So one of the things that, you know, if a caller, how quick can they get that call dispatched, notify the fire department that there's a structure fire? Is it a, you know, combative caller? Is it somebody who just calls and says there's a fire and hangs up?
Mhm.
Or do they get good information and they know that it's a residential structure fire
Mhm.
and they send the right equipment
Mhm.
to it instead of just sending, you know, one fire engine?
Gotcha. And the other question I have is kind of parallel with what we talked about earlier. So when they go dispatch on this thing, how do we identify what they doing, not only putting out the fire, but they're doing life-saving, you know, CPR or whatever it may be out there? How do we quantify that?
So there's a couple of things, we call them benchmarks.
Yeah.
So you can say, we're at patient,
Mm-hmm.
CPR started,
Mm-hmm.
fire under control, you know, whatever it is, we can identify what those are. And there's a couple ways that we can do it. The telecommunicator, when she or they hear it, they can put a timestamp on it.
Mm-hmm.
If we have iPads and we're at a patient, we can touch the button and say we're at the side of the patient, we got CPR, Malcolm will love this, medication started. I mean, just a whole thing, a lot of things that we can do.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to do, I mean, look, I mean, first responders especially, you know, with how much, what they do when they get on site, I just want to make sure they're getting credit for it. That's-
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
But backing out before you go to that granular level, one of the interesting things on this is down there at the very bottom, that's broken out by hour of the day. So again, using this as a tool for the county and at the department level, you know, we can look over a period of time and look at trends, and we can see if there's a time of the day where either it's busier or for whatever reason we have an extended response time. You know, as we talk about staffing, coverage areas where we deploy squad units, where we may consider additional staffing in the future, the same is applying on the EMS side. We can use this type of data to say, okay, here's an opportunity there. We have an extended response time in this time of day. Well, why is that?
Mhm.
Let's go down into the root cause and find out how do we address that root cause. Is it a staffing issue? Is it a distance issue for the station that maybe it's located too far away? What is really one of the impacts of it? And then we can kind of guide some of our future decisions using this type of data. We discussed this with the tax board when we had that training as well, and encourage them as you talk about what are your staffing levels, what are your equipment needs, you know, how do you plan for the future with substations or things. Use this data to help empower you to make those decisions, because we're harnessing on our side to do the same thing.
Yeah. And there's traffic control, right? Component too, where sheriff's office has to control the traffic so you can get to where they need to. So yeah, there's.
Matt's going to talk about that. Just,
Yeah.
just
Oh,
a second
okay.
there.
Okay.
But
Yes, that, traffic is important. There we go. So quickly, one of the things that I kind of identified early on was we need to look at travel distance from stations. And so as a standard, you use 35 miles, and then we broke it down from each station, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, and 10 minutes. And we can get you a bigger picture if this is not adequate. But we've identified some areas that realistically the fire engine just can't get there in time. So when we start talking about measurements, you know, we want to make sure that those are taken into consideration. Also, this kind of gives us a good idea too that maybe we need to look at call volume in a certain area, and if that fire engine can't get there in a certain time, maybe we need to look at our distribution of our stations. So this is one thing that GIS really worked good with us on, but there's some areas in the county that's just going to take a fire engine a long time to get there. So I just wanted to make sure, let y'all know about that. The next one that we kind of dug into, and again, this is not punitive, this is just information that we use as far as planning. So when a fire department is dispatched, and for whatever reason, time of day, whatever it is, they don't have somebody respond, we call it going to the second and third dispatch. And so it doesn't happen often, but it does happen. And so what we're trying to identify is why certain areas, if a department's having challenges and they go to a second or a third dispatch, what's the challenge? How can we address that? As David said, is it time of day? Is it, week, month, whatever that is, we need to identify that. Again, it's not punitive, but we're starting to take a good down deep look at why some departments can't turn out in that first or second dispatch before it goes to third dispatch. Any questions? All right, so what's ahead of us? So as I mentioned before, we've had briefed the Fire Advisory Committee on the standards, how we're evaluating it, and we're going to be looking at them for recommendations to bring back to y'all as far as our response standards and what that looks like moving forward. I'm going to stick to the fire advisory, and we'll skip one. There's been some concerns about the way that the stipend has been delivered. We've got some inconsistencies. Our own auditor has asked us to look at some stuff, so we're going to be engaging the Fire Advisory Committee again to figure out what the path looks like moving forward and how it can be equitable across the county. We're going to engage with the Fire Chiefs Association about recruitment. That's a big deal that we need to focus on. I think there's a lot of opportunity in York County for recruitment and getting new people in the fire service. David may want to speak to this just a little bit more, but we're going to follow up. We've got one tax district that we're working with pretty heavily to incorporate their staffing into county employment. But we're going to follow up with other counties. It's been, we've met with all of them, but I think one, and they've asked a lot of good questions, and they've kind of sent us back to the drawing board, and I think we've got a good plan moving forward to address some of those questions. You want to?
Yeah, so we kind of had a lot of, obviously when we first presented this, it was more of an exploratory conversation. Since then, we've taken a lot of feedback and the questions that were very applicable, just things related to overtime, the pay, insurance. There's a lot of kind of questions, making sure that we align appropriately. We've taken that back, and now what we've worked through is a formal kind of proposal answering some of those questions, but also now creating a district profile for each of them that shows possibly some of the cost and benefits, because there's both. There's definitely benefit to it, and there are some additional costs with it. Ultimately, we hope that the costs are driven down by moving forward with something like this. But now we formalize a lot of that. We'll be going back around and to present that information back to them. Again, kind of creating a district profile for each tax district so that they understand, not just generally, we're talking about specific impacts and what it looks like to map with them. So that's kind of where our follow-up will be ahead of this next budget year.
Can I ask some clarification?
Sure.
Some clarification. So, just so I understand, I'm hurting. I've got the website pulled up. I got it going. That's good. No idea that was even there. Second, third dispatch calls. So I just look in an area. Fort Mill's easy. I say 2, 2, 2, 2, and 3. What does that really mean?
So, yeah, that's a great question. So where you see that number,
right,
that's where a call went to the second dispatch or the third dispatch.
But
So
so this is, one second, this is January 2024 to August 21st, 2025. A second dispatch, are we saying that two different entities, two different, what are we saying? I'm sorry.
When they were,
I don't know what I don't know.
When they were dispatched the first time,
Uh-huh.
that no one was available or no one was en route to the call after the first dispatch. That means that after a certain period of time, I think it's 5 minutes. 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, that dispatch held out that call again. That's what the second call this. So that's what the 2 would indicate, that after 3 minutes, there wasn't a unit en route. Then after 5 minutes.
now.
And then there would be a third dispatch. At that third dispatch is the time at which another department is also automatically sent. So that's what those numbers would indicate.
That's where the mutual aid part comes in.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So then
But it's a
that's-
length of time as well.
Right.
That's the
Yes.
length of time of a response.
Yeah,
And you also have that neighboring department traveling that distance too to go into another district. So that's why it's important to us to try to figure out what exactly is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So does that, when you have a second and a third, because obviously they're tied up on something else that's going on, how does that tie back into EMS and Sheriff's Office in order to try to mitigate at least somebody getting there in a reasonable time?
So depending on the call type,
Mhm.
there may already be an EMS unit en route.
Mhm.
So there may not be a delay there.
Yep.
Again, same thing with the sheriff's office, depending on the call type.
Yeah.
They may already be en route. Now, if this is strictly a fire, they may
Mhm.
not be en route.
Mhm.
So there
Okay.
may not be another unit coming. It really just all depends on the call type. And that's one of the things that this doesn't necessarily capture. That's
Yeah.
why we have to dive in a little bit deeper.
Right, if
to
there's
find
some
out.
stuff to peel back here.
Right,
Sure.
because if it was, if they're, just because you see a 2 or a 3 up there, but then you dive in and then you realize, oh, this was, a priority 2 call for a lift assist or something of an extremely low
Yeah,
consequence.
yeah.
Okay, you take that as an outlier and say, okay, that's not necessarily the one that we're focused on. But let's say that there was an active structure fire, and that went to a second or third. Okay, now we need to know, we need to look at that a little bit deeper and say, well, what was going on in that
Yeah.
timeframe that led to some of those causes?
There's some onions to be peeled. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's more data.
And you will have outliers, and those generally fall, we measure things at the 80th and the 90th percentile.
Uh-huh.
So if you have some of those outliers, most of the time they'll get kicked out.
Mhm.
But if not, we need to take a look at them to see exactly what's going on with them.
I don't know if this is a fair question or not, but why not ask it? So second, third dispatch calls, there are a lot on here. Do you have any idea how many on this represent 2 and how many represent 3? How many of these dots, like are 300 2s and 400 3s? What are we looking at here?
Every one of them is a singular call.
Right, but do we know how many in this period of time? Do
I
we know
don't.
what's represented here?
I don't, but we can get you that.
Okay, now let me ask this question then. I will go back to the beginning of the presentation,
Okay.
which was EMS franchise ordinance, which has to do with emergent, non-emergent, telehealth and everything else. So the whole idea is that if we establish a little structure here, then we may have less 2s and 3s here, maybe. And then so my question then is 3 minutes, is this a realistic expectation that the response is within 3 minutes? That is realistic. Nationally, that's a
Yes.
realistic expectation.
Yes.
So then we look at this and then we have some work to do,
Absolutely.
That's correct.
especially the
Absolutely.
3s.
Correct.
Well, tell me this, has it ever been looked into, and this may be irrelevant, but if you take like my side, the rural side, and a lot of distance to cover, versus the municipality side, and the amount of traffic and all that, how much does that close them up in travel time?
Yeah.
Because you could be close here in the municipality setting, but you get tangled up for just as much a length of time.
Sure, usually in municipalities and those that have either a combination or a full-time system, your turnout time is going to be much shorter because they're already at the station. But those standards are separate. We treat them separately. So keep in mind, we don't apply the same standards to like a strictly volunteer department that they would. So they're not the same criteria that they're being measured against. There's different NFPA criteria for both of them.
Urban, suburban.
Urban,
rural.
suburban.
Urban,
That's
suburban,
right, yeah.
and you can see where it's broken down by career department. But you bring up a good point, because one of the things that we do need to incorporate is traffic in some of these. But you can see it's broken down by, say, career versus rural. The standard is different. But the standard is important, but you always want to look at continuous improvement. And if we've got a good road network, then a fire engine or emergency vehicle can travel, you know, there pretty fast. But you get in rural areas where there's limited road network, and you've got to go down, you know, a long road to get to something else, it can be longer.
And another thing, if you're gonna get this technical in this, when that call comes in, and it may already be in place, I ain't sure, but I do know some departments have a hard time getting out. Would it be able to link that up where automatically when the call comes through, it's already before they even get their doors up, already doing something to respond lights in the highway, you know, where they're ready to go?
Traffic advisory.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are usually independent, depending where the station is located. Some of them have them, some of them don't, but, yeah.
You know, just, I guess just a comment. I know we're more commercial, I know time we won't shut up, but yeah, it's 5 till 7. Everybody's ready to go home. I think it's great that the fire department's here and they're involved in this process, and that's critically important as we look over the next 10 years of what we're going to do with fire, right? That you guys are involved in this. Because I look at this map and I think, I don't know where the I don't know where all the locations are. Newport's got 4 locations, so forth and so on. There's a lot of locations. I think there's 35 locations throughout the county, if I added them up right. But when those locations were built, Newport's in my district. Carl and I were on the phone this week talking with Bill and Pete. When Newport, I guess if Newport 1 was built, that was, you know, way out in unincorporated York County. Now it's surrounded by the city of Rock Hill. So when we begin to look at this in the future, if we had no locations, it'd be pretty easy to say, well, we probably need to put one right here, we need to put one right here, you know what I'm saying? But it's not so easy because we have all these other locations now. But when you begin to reposition the fire departments with all of your help, then you're going to have a more efficient system even from doing that eventually, which is going to be expensive but necessary to gain efficiency, right? So growth has happened in some of these areas. It's forcing you to go back and take a hard look at where the actual fire department should actually sit based on the current growth and future growth.
And annexation.
Yeah.
Which
Right.
we're trying to address that on the state level. But
Yeah, because I mean, the predictability, you can identify where permits are being pulled and we can identify where future growth is. But I think it also ties into activity through RFATs, right? Because we got to understand, you know, based on, for example, Watts and the conversation we had around connector roads and our project on how we want to approach that. I mean, you know, if you get a call at, you know, midday as opposed to 5 p.m. when everybody's coming home from work, there's a reroute and you know, based on traffic flows, we got to identify. But connector roads play a role in time. You know, so I think all this plays together.
So interestingly enough, on the EMS side, not to go back to that, but there are systems, our current GPS system is one of them, that can take into account real-time traffic patterns.
Sure.
And can recommend a better route.
Yeah.
So rather than
Yeah.
going off of
That's
a
correct.
historical route that you know, it can say, based on, you know, it's kind of like Google Maps. When you pull
Yeah.
Google Maps, it gives you 3 or 4 routes based
Yeah.
on the time. It can incorporate that and route an ambulance. In theory, it could route a fire truck as well with those traffic patterns en route. So technology is absolutely going to be
Well,
in that discussion as well.
as a Waze concept to it, right?
Yep,
You know, right?
yep,
So,
just like that.
yeah.
thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, good stuff. Good job.
Is that it?
2 more items real fast. So we're also working with fire departments on developing their budget. We're going to take just a tad bit different approach this year with them to talk about what their needs are. And then lastly, Dave and I both identified we need to work with our municipalities and their municipal fire departments and incorporate our plan in with theirs to get their feedback.
That's big. That's big. I'm glad you brought that up because, I mean, individual identity for these fire departments is critical, right? So that, you know, we talk in the partnership from the municipalities plays a big role, you know, and I'll be interested to see how that all is going to be expanded on.
That's all.
Sure.
Yeah.
Talking about individual identity right quick, so I'm thankful that I was able to get on the phone with Bill, Carl, and Pete this week to learn a little bit more about some things related to the fire departments. And I'll deem Bill the county historian when it comes to all the fire departments. He didn't have to look at a piece of paper, they would give me data right off the top of his head. But I found it interesting when I started going through this, based on what you said about identity, because obviously, I mean, you guys have been our fire service for years, and it goes back generational, that you want to keep your identity, you want to protect your identity, we just have to figure out how to do that. But I think the identity piece, from what I'm hearing, is more about the badges on your trucks and the colors of your trucks, right? Right. So I thought it was interesting, though, and I'm going to say this in reverse of how Bill said it. I'm going to say red, white, red, black, red charcoal, red, red, and then white and blue. So there are actually 7 of you that have red, white. There's 2 of you that have red, black. There's one that's technically 2 because you have a truck that's charcoal, but you'd be good with potentially red, white. So I didn't put you as a charcoal. I only did 1 as the red charcoal. 5 is red, red, and 1 is white and blue. So when I looked at this, and I'm thinking about your identity and what you want, what you'd like to have, the truck's red, the cab is either white, red, charcoal, or black, right? So I think we have some homework to do to go back to the vendor and find out if trucks are with you for 30 years, and we're buying 3 a year, then we might can get ahead of how we order the trucks and what kind of trucks are available at what cost. Maybe there's some efficiency there. Maybe we settle in. I mean, 12 of you either have red, white, or red, red. Maybe those 2 are the options. It doesn't only affects a few if you have to choose. I'm just saying we need to be realistic about how we talk through this and figure out solutions and cost. I was blown away to find out that throughout the county we have 141 vehicles. That's a lot. So a lot of things to consider when we're talking about taxpayers' dollars, we're talking about identity, we're talking about the history, the future. There are a lot of things that have to be taken into consideration as one council person, only 170. I'm just talking out loud here that I learned a lot from the call, and I'm appreciative of you sharing everything you shared. And so, you know, with a little more due diligence, we may can come up with a good solution for everybody.
Yeah, so just to speak on that real quick, you know, what we've done thus far, particularly some of the ones we've already ordered, is discuss that wrap concept of wrapping them to accommodate that, and the wrap is available in all those colors. I know there's concerns about warranty, how long wraps last, the condition underneath and everything. What we've been told is that the warranty matches the paint. So that's
so a 10-year warranty.
10-year warranty. Same thing for the paint. Again, that's not to say that that's a perfect answer, but trying to address, Watts, to your point, the individuality of allowing it to at least match a fleet, having the sense of pride and things like that, trying to blend it. Again, you know, and I think I mentioned this to, I appreciate Pete talking to me, is we try to create consistency across the county. Everything's red, pretty much, except for Flint Hill, but Flint Hill's the outlier with white. Establishing that base color was, I believe that was actually put in motion before Matt, right, Peter got here. But again, that's a base concept. But it can be flexed with that, with a wrap or anything like that, to accommodate that. But the more important piece is trying to respect the individuality of the department and trying to find a blending between the 2. Historically, we have not rotated apparatus around. That is a true statement. You know, they literally, I'll say this in the appropriate setting, I didn't say it this morning, but cradle to grave.
Yeah, that's right.
The appropriate setting. But literally for a truck, cradle to grave has historically stayed with one department. Now, that's not efficient. You know, that's some cradle to graves may be 10 years, others may be 25 years.
Right.
But we can really even that out if we'll have a proper rotation schedule. In order to do that, you know, wraps are one of those things that can be removed, and then you still have that base color. They can also be reapplied if it needs to match another department versus a paint scheme. If it's just painted that color, you know, now we can't change it back to that base color. That was the original thought behind that and the purpose behind it. Again, but I hear what you're saying. Sorry.
So I agree with cradle to grave, and that's not very efficient when we put a fire engine in one station and it runs 100 calls versus put it in a station that runs 3,000 calls. So one of the things when you talk about 140 some pieces of apparatus, we really need to make sure with the cost of them, we're getting the best out of them. I get the identity. We don't want to take away anybody's identity, but we need to find some compromise there and make sure that we're being good taxpayers moving forward on fire engines and what that looks like.
And to that point, I think you had mentioned earlier, is wrapping them better than painting them? Maybe not. Maybe that's what we need to revisit. Maybe that's where we could possibly be, losing money, or maybe that is waste. So, that's definitely something that we can consider and talk about to determine is that the best course. So, I think we're open to that.
I hadn't seen the wraps too good on as far as private sector stuff. I mean, it gets chipped in and starts coming off, but
The one thing I
it
think
gets chipped too. And I'd just like to say I don't like to use the word pride because pride becomes for fall, but historical and unified and across the board, not just take fire out of the whole equation, because we've been dealing with a lot of stuff, and y'all have even heard me mention the council that we can no longer agree to disagree in our society now. But since we are talking about the fire part, and I didn't know you was going to cover into this, but it is something to do historical and the unity and of the community, because a lot of this, vast majority of those states started before I was even born, and they still do have a community presence. So I do think that we need to be very cautious in that. I understand the taxpayer part, but at the same time, personally, and it may make some of them out there upset, I don't understand why we ain't fixing more trucks, because I am a diesel mechanic, and don't nobody tell me that you can't fix, because you can. Now, you might have to change over to a different pump or a different engine. I retrofit engines in different trucks all the time. Caterpillar, I put Cummins in. I mean, all that. And on the electronic side, we best hope in these fire trucks what is happening in the private truck side does not start happening, because you're going to see major breakdowns going back, because the stuff ain't working, they ain't got the bugs out of it. And regen is one of the most aggravating systems that you ever have. And you get one with screwed up wiring system on that, parking you on the side of the road. I personally pick and choose to have older stuff, because older stuff you can make function, and you can get just the same speed and everything out. But anyway, that.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is a good discussion. I mean, it's all, the concern at the end of the day is keeping their identity while moving forward a strategic plan, right? I guess the way I look at it is that, again, conversation around color and everything, but I guess I look at it as how do we allow them to build a robust volunteer program from within each of their facilities? What does drive a robust volunteer program from there? And again, it's community participation and people being involved, community events. Again, we can strategize around it, but I guess to me, a strong volunteer program is critical to these fire departments. And how can we strategize around helping them build that volunteer for each of those fire departments?
That's an important piece of our plan.
It is, yeah.
And it needs to be unification, even between all of those being on board and unified with one another. But it's to me, it gets a little bigger than just what's right in front of us, because it seems like in today's time, everything that we've thrown money at and education at we ain't exactly getting the results that I said it up there, remember one night on council on when we was dealing with why could you back when we didn't make a lot of money, you could buy land, a house, and eat. And I said the statement then, people make more money now than ever. You got better education, so-called, supposedly. But we got more disheartenness between us than any time I've ever seen in history. So I think it is about unifying them and getting a program started up with more volunteers. And since we on the subject though, I know all this is a work in progress. But have we ever actually did the numbers on how much you can afford and how far you can go with it as far as?
If you remember at our budget retreat last year, and I intend on doing the same thing this year, I presented a slide to you that showed that we were sustainable for about 2 or 3 more years.
Yeah.
But after 3 years, and that was staying even keeled, that was without any increase whatsoever. In 3 years, that sustainability flipped upside down, and it was no longer sustainable. Now, as we continue to grow and add things, and as things have gotten more expensive, those years are waning even farther down. So it's absolutely looking unsustainability in the face without some significant efficiency changes, but also there's undoubtedly going to be increases in the future as well.
Well, yeah, because I mean, in today's climate, I don't know how you can actually depend upon nothing.
Yeah, but I made that
I remember,
case at the retreat last year, and I'll do it again this year to break it out and show you that 5-year forecast again. Yep.
You got any more?
I'm good, I'm good.
Okay, now, let's see, discussion regarding boards and commission members' conduct. This, y'all remember we referred this in November. But Michael ain't here tonight, and I was going to see what y'all thought about this before we even start discussing this, to refer this to management and legal.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and
I
for
think
y'all
so.
to go to different jurisdictions and find out, if you can, how any other people have approached this problem,
Yeah,
and report it back to us.
we're glad to do that. I think some context from y'all would be helpful. For us, I know you mentioned boards and commissions. I think when Michael and I have discussed this, I think it's important to have a decorum policy for county council as well. I would want anything that we ask our boards and commissions to fall under to also be something that y'all are willing to approve for yourselves. So I do think we're talking about a decorum policy for county council and for any boards and commissions. I think y'all fall underneath that. So
I agree with
so
that.
and I think there's a difference between, what people can say and sharing opinions, and then detrimental behavior that I think, is out of bounds. And I think that's another thing that we can bring back is kind of where we think the line should be drawn in terms of what decorum is and when we should actually have a conversation.
But I just wanted to make that reference because there's no need in us doing nothing if we don't legally know what we can or can't do.
Yeah, I would recommend, let's go ahead and move that over to staff, and we can go ahead and get a recommendation from y'all.
I think that
Yeah,
And-
I'm good with that.
And also, I think it was in April or something, have we ever found out if we ever got a deal on the timeline that we had also sent back on how to schedule the boards?
Yeah, so we've talked to our county attorney about that. I know he's working on it. He has to come back since he couldn't be here tonight. Obviously, we're not able to talk about that, but I would want him to be the one to kind of walk through that with you all as a committee. But I know he's prepared for that.
Okay.
But if we can make sure we put that on a future agenda so we can get that in
Yeah.
well in
Yeah.
advance. Yeah.
Got them scanned?
I would ask the committee to consider adding one thing to this. They're open to it, but in addition to members' conduct, whether it's county council or committees, executive session falls into this as well, in my opinion. You know, being careful of what we're discussing in executive session, the conduct of executive session, what stays in executive session, and cannot come out of executive session, and we enforce this. Otherwise, what's the use of executive session, which is after we should have conversation with the public, listening to everything, which I have no problem with personally, but we probably need an annual cadence where the chair of a committee or the chair of county council or the chair of one of the commissions and boards, where they cover this. They cover Robert's rules and remind everybody what's expected of you. I, for one, hear of things that are discussed in executive session out in public, and it's pretty bothersome. So just being reminded of what the expectation is, I think, is important for all of us.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I just don't want to add on another layer of bureaucracy when we already have the Roberts rules. So I think we first need to look at Robert's rules and identify, and educate, or just go over those policies, based on what other requires. Because I'm a little concerned when you start adding on layers of bureaucracy on top of what's already existing, identified, in case, we can start baseline with Robert's rules. I guess that's my point.
So where we summarize the same thing, I'm not
Yeah.
interested in bureaucracy either,
Yeah.
but an annual reminder of what your expectation is as it relates to executive session should happen in all entities that meet in this county.
Yeah.
If we only do that, you've satisfied me.
Y'all want a motion on this, or can we just charge you to do it?
Yeah, we're good.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Anything?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, here's the time Bill's been waiting for. All right, we're going to start up something different on the public comments. All right, hear me out. It's going to be for 10 minutes, and that'll generally give anybody who wants to speak anywhere from 2. There ain't a whole bunch of folks wanting to speak. But we set it at 10 minutes max for all of us' sake. But in saying that, I would request, if you don't get to speak, or you do have something that runs longer and you won't, you email us and management with your question or whatever it may be, so we're getting it at the same time management's getting it. And for any extended things that you'd like to do, I would like to see that, are you listening, Kate? That
She's recording you.
we add on the option that they be able to address us as a board, put it on our agenda. So if they have something they want to discuss, they could address us. But they'd have to set it up previous ahead of time to add something to the agenda they want to discuss.
That's probably a broader conversation for council in general, for all committees.
Yeah, that's.
But I hear what you're saying, because I've
Yeah.
sat in plenty of meetings when there are people in the audience that had something to share that I could have
That's right.
benefited from, but they didn't have an opportunity to. But we
Yeah.
also don't want to be in committee meetings till 10 o'clock at night.
Well, that's
I
true.
want to.
And we could put a so-called limit, sort of like citizens' concern in regular council.
Would you be okay if we talk about that as a full council? So
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
can
I mean,
Yeah.
that'd be fine.
Yeah,
honor
that.
the great opinions of everyone.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that'd be fine, we can do that.
Agreed. Yep. Absolutely agree. Yep.
So anyway, at this time, public comments.
Before we get started, I got something I want to pass to the council members.
Thank you, sir.
You have another copy for the clerk?
I can.
I can give her mine, and then she can
No, I
email
don't
me.
know about you, man.
Okay.
I'll put that out to be effective. Thank you.
Okay. What y'all have already talked about truck paint colors.
each individual fire department would like to keep our identity that we've had since 1991 with two-tone truck colors. We have 5 departments that like solid red, and we've got 11 departments that like two-tone colors. A couple different colors, Mr. Huckabee's already discussed that. On engines and tankers, we can decide if we, at the time we want to purchase the truck with the manufacturers, indicate what color of paint we want. Grass trucks and service truck chassis, we've always, in the past 35 years, painted those locally, simply because you typically can't buy two-tone paint through state contracts, so we've got the two tones painted locally. All that's been at the cost of the county. Back years ago, when we first started getting two-tone paint back in 1991, the manufacturers didn't charge any extra for two-tone. It was free. This year, I mean, and I've done some research with different manufacturers, not the current vendors, other manufacturers. And we bought an engine today. We bought it from before the first piece of metal was bent. It would be between $3,000 and $5,000 to get it painted two-tone. Tankers would be somewhere between $1,700 and $2,200. Grass trucks, $1,200 to $2,000. Service trucks, same thing. The county bought a couple stock trucks that was on the ground that was already built. Out of those, 2 trucks are going to be wrapped because they were already red. It doesn't make sense to buy a truck that's on stock and have it two-tone painted. It's just astronomical price, between $20,000 and $28,000 to get one painted. But if you do it when you first get the truck before it's built, when the PO is wrote, it's not going to cost you any more than it is to get it wrapped.
Time.
What?
Time, you too, it's up.
Go ahead then. What I had left is right here. You can read it in front of your eyes.
We got you.
I can pick up where Bill had left off. Myself too, to check with vendors. You order a new truck, you know what departments are getting them. You turn in the colors which you order, with customs or commercial. Same way with your spec trucks. You tell the vendor, we want 3 spec trucks next year. When they start, we want a solid red, we want a white over red, we want a gray over red. It comes right down the line, just like your asphalt. And the cost of the paint is not that much more than the wrapping. Trucks for the last 35 years have stayed at the main station that it went to for 35 years. That was the truck replacement plan we had. The first line truck, first out, stayed first out for 15 years. Then it went to second out, and a new truck was replaced. So that first truck life is 30 years, and it stayed at the department it was put at. And we hear that, you know, well, we're going to lose money, you can't have compartmentation in the bodies like you want. Well, if I don't have a certain compartmentation in my body, and Leslie's going to have a certain one in their body, well, then those 2 trucks couldn't swap. For the simple reason, the body compartmentation is not right. It's not consistent. So it would be best to leave the department, the truck with the department, the lifetime of the truck, life of the truck, stay in the same department. Whether they run a lot of calls or they don't run as many calls. But the main thing is, it goes back to the history and keeping our colors. And you talk about you want the fire service to come together. Well, tonight is the first time you see this many chiefs, and we got a sheet with all the signatures that we're coming together.
Thank
So
you.
we'll be back for other topics, but we're coming together. That's what y'all want, that's why they here,
Thank you.
support us.
Thank you, guys.
Who else? Anybody else?
Right now at Leslie, we have 7 out of 11 of our apparatuses that's two-tone. We're one-to-ones with black on red, black top on red. Our oldest apparatus is 2005, our newest is 2017. We're not due another truck under the program until 2030. So you're talking about identity, that's one of the few things we got left. So we would like the cooperation from the committee to support our identity. Thank you.
Can I ask? Okay, I'm sorry.
Hearing all this, I want to say ditto on all. What Carl brought up about compartmentalization, I know Bill was talking about an engine and he wanted basically a rescue engine. But the specific needs of a certain community may not fit to others because of the equipment that you are required to have on the truck. I'm all for the white over red. We have had that since the early 90s ourselves. It is an identity that the community is familiar with. Now I know when somebody calls 911, they don't care if it's pink with purple polka dots. But I think, you need to, don't take the pride away from the department. It's hard enough, you're talking about recruiting volunteers. It's hard enough to get people, period, anymore to volunteer. Fort Mill has moved from a community of wrench turners to, I'm not sure what they do for a living now. But, work with the department, help them get the truck that's going to give them the optimized ability to give services that are needed and the community expects and they deserve. And it's not going to get any cheaper. We all know that. But I think identity means a lot to the stations. It brings pride to the members. It brings pride to the community. And when you do community events, people see it and they ask questions and they give you a thumbs up. And thanks to the community and the county for helping us through the years. Our district received 3 specific trucks from the county, which was originally designed in the program when you put a station. Our tax district has went above and beyond to purchase everything else. So out of the 7 apparatus we got, 3 were initially county trucks. So the tax districts do provide a need for equipment and services.
Thank you. I won't repeat what anybody else has said, any of the other gentlemen have said, but the identity, in my mind, is a means of building support and building the cadre that you have. If you look at the military, you will find that there are very distinctive pieces of their uniforms that they wear. The paratroopers have the bloused boots. The special forces have the green berets. You look at the Scotch with their bagpipes, their kilts, etc. This is all a means of identity. And I believe it would help in terms of recruiting additional volunteers. I think it's important. And I know from Newport, we need more volunteers in Newport. We're not getting them the way we used to. And that's part of it is because people are commuting greater distances. So we need to recruit more local people. We again need to build pride in our communities, and that's one way.
Anybody else?
Yeah. One other thing.
We got it. We made it through 10.
Okay. One other thing. Thank you for this ability.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's a great addition.
All right, do we got? You got any comment?
Nothing for
I'll get with you guys. I'll talk more about compartments, the compartments on the truck, so I can understand that a little better. Because you mentioned that too. You'd think there'd be a standard engine, but apparently there's not. So I'd like to understand that better. Might even come out and just do it.
You got anything for executive session?
Nothing for executive session.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Josh is going to